You're listening to Dropping Pins, a story-based learning series from the Okayest Hunter podcast, hosted by Derek Melkor, and aimed at helping you hone your whitetail hunting skills. You'll hear the aha moments when known and unknown proven whitetail killers started consistently putting mature bucks on the ground.
All right, folks, good to see you. Welcome back to Dropping Pins. This is season 2, episode 2, and our first guest of this summer. So if you're just joining us, we just kicked off our second seasonal podcast series of Dropping Pins, which is a educational-ish series here that we do for Okayest Hunter podcast, in which we talk to some people who have been able to find some luck at getting after big bucks on public or private, all over different places, rifle, bow, people who just maybe have a little bit different way of thinking and who have really honed their skills and found a way to be successful on what's becoming a harder and harder endeavor every year. And that's getting on a nice big old buck. So today we've got a great guest, one that comes very highly recommended from our fearless leader, Eric Clark. It's actually his cousin. So today we've got on Jeremy Clark. Jeremy, welcome to the Dropping Pins podcast. How you doing, buddy?
Real good.
It's good to have you on. We just chatted a little bit beforehand. Eric has mentioned you on the Okayest Hunter podcast a number of times over the years, someone that he really looks up to and who has learned a lot from you and really envied your success in the woods. So it's really good to get you on and talk to you. If you wouldn't mind, just for our listener base here, maybe do a quick little intro, a little bit about you, where you're from, and what the home life is like.
Yeah, I'm Southeast Wisconsin, and got 2 little kids, a 7 and a 5-year-old. It's like, so that's nothing too crazy.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm right there with the 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. So we're in the similar boat there. As far as the construction goes, the stuff you're doing, is that fairly seasonal? Do you get to take a decent amount of time off in the fall, or are you pretty busy?
No, I'm pretty busy year round. I'm a carpenter by trade, but specialize in ceiling systems. But I get basically 2 weeks, guaranteed two weeks off essentially, and I try to use as much of that for hunting, but still kids are getting older, so I gotta not be so not use it all for myself, and make some memories with the family too.
Yeah, that vacation time is going to start getting split in a lot of different ways, I would imagine. So hopefully
good reasons.
Oh, for sure. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that employer can rack you up another week. That'd be nice,
right. Huh? Yep. I'll take what I can get.
Yeah. Me being a teacher, a public school teacher, I get so much time off, but it's all right now, and I'm grateful for it. We're contracted through that part of the year, but it's really hard to take any time during the hunting season. So I feel you on that one. That's tough. And then I'm going to ask you a question I've asked all of our guests in the past, and that's a little bit about the type of terrain, the type of stuff you kind of cut your teeth hunting. What got, are you hunting a lot of public, a lot of private? What's the terrain like? Anything you could explain to our viewers that's just going to give them a little bit of insight as to what kind of stuff as you're telling some stories or talking about experiences, so they got an idea of what you kind of grew up.
I grew up hunting. As a kid, I was foaming at the mouth to start hunting when I was younger. My dad was big as well, and so that's kind of how I got into it. And but basically hunting farmland. The area I live in it's a lot of swamp, a lot of lowland, wetlands, and river bottoms, but a lot of farmland as well. So pretty much hunting that. It's not real hilly around here, but a mix of private and public. I hunted public a lot as a kid, and just as much now, so too. But it's that's gotten a little harder these last few years. It seems like it's just a lot more people on it. It's like you hear it. There's less people hunting every year, but I feel like there's more people hunting around me every year.
That's the truth. That's the truth.
I think it's the not so many guys in the North Woods anymore where everybody used to flock to. So now the southern half of the state has picked up the slack here. So.
Well, yeah, people started flocking to where those deer numbers were. There used to be a pretty decent herd up in the northern part of the state, and as wolves moved down, and just the habitat changed, people changed where they hunted because they didn't like going up and seeing one deer over the 9-day gun season. So we got more pressure around here for sure. So when you grew up hunting the public grounds around you, were you doing bow hunting right off as a young guy, or were you just doing gun? Or
no, bow. I didn't really do a lot of gun hunting on the public as a kid. Mainly it was bow hunting. It seemed like gun hunting. It's I like bow hunting. I mean, by far, it's that takes the cake. Gun hunting, it's sometimes it feels like cheating after I've been grinding my teeth with the bow, and then all of a sudden I can sit in a pop-up blind with a Mr. Heater between my legs and a thermos of coffee and in a camping chair with a 30-06 across my lap. It's awesome. I love it. But it's like you go from the other extreme to that. It's like, it's pretty cool, but
yeah, it does. It feel a little bit like cheating after here in Wisconsin. Our season comes in, our archery season, usually the second or third weekend in September. And then you've got about 2 solid months, a little bit more than that, where you've just messed up encounters at 15 yards. You've had deer hang up at 40. Nothing can go right. And then you get that rifle in your lap, and you feel a little bit more equalizer power.
Yeah, it's like you see it. All I got to do is see them at 100 yards and have them stand still where I want them, and it's done. But
yeah,
it's awesome. I like it. It's more of like guns. More like it's great for like families to get together and traditions and getting kids involved in it too. I think it's a good time, good way to do all that stuff. But bow hunting is more that primitive. Just getting them close and the cat and mouse of it's not just so much just watch them running for their lives. It's a completely different ball game, but it's
rifle hunting in an area like what you've kind of described as growing up in, which is like parcels of agriculture, and then you've got like the low swampy stuff where farming, where they can't get in and till stuff. You're just I would imagine those deer are just running from pocket to pocket during gun season because they're spooked, right? So like you were mentioning, it's a very different style or thought process of hunting during that time of year when there's just people in all the woodlots versus when you're bow hunting and these deer have, a totally different mindset on what they're trying to do. It's a very different game.
Yeah. And actually I do most of my gun hunt in southeast Wisconsin, Jefferson County to be exact, but for the most part. But I do a lot of gun hunting in hill country. I've got a lease that I'm in on up in the hill country, and that's where I spend most of my time gun hunting. And that's cool. That's just you can. It's a completely different game in that hill country, and that's something that I've really been getting into over the last 10, 15 years. But that was like relearning how to deer hunt when I was used to hunting the swamps and in places where you hear half the time you can hear them, but you don't see them to learning thermals and all that stuff. That was a real big learning curve,
Yeah,
that's where all the hot signs, but everything smells you, and it's just I'd set up on top of the hill, and you'd see the action in the bottom. So I set up in the bottoms, and then they're up on the hills, and then it was just it's just relearning how to hunt, the different terrains. It's a different animal over there.
I think that's something that maybe later on, after we get through a little bit of the things that you had mentioned before, after we talk a little bit about that, I'd love to get your opinion on, a little bit more about those differences, because that's something I'm kind of doing also is, I like hunting deer in any terrain I can find them. I've tried to learn as many different terrains as possible. I just think it's fun to learn new stuff about them and try new areas. But I'd love to pick your brain a little bit about that. Maybe a little bit later on in the podcast. But you had mentioned before a story about your, I think it was your first deer you ever took, or your first buck with the bow. I'd love to jump into that. You had some good points you made, and I'd love to maybe get started there and get the ball rolling.
Okay. Well, yeah, when I think my dad wouldn't let me bow hunt until I was prolific with the bow, and I think it wasn't until I was 14. You could when I was younger, you could start at 12, but it was I'd shoot like league and stuff with them, but I wasn't a good shot, and probably by the time I was 14, he deemed me good enough to be able to.
Was there any kind of like test you had to do? Like, was it like 5 arrows and a pie plate, or what was his?
Yeah,
what was his
I
gauge?
had to pretty much. Yeah, what it was. I was probably like shoots or something, and I needed to put arrows in the pipe consistently. That's kind of what and he just needed to feel confident that I wasn't going to go out there and turn these deer into pin cushions, I guess. But but that was motivated me to practice a lot and get better. And then when I was 14, I think I hunted hard that season, and then that's all I wanted to do, and I'd spend the summers and springs just looking for deer. There's a piece of private I could hunt down the road, and I'd go and lay up on a hayfield hillside and just glass the deer coming out. And actually that summer I seen a bachelor group of bucks. It was like 5-6 bucks. I never, you read about that stuff, and I didn't know that. I thought it was amazing. And there was one it was probably a couple 2-year-olds and some 1.5-year-olds, and then there was probably a nice 3-year-old in the bunch, and the 3-year-old was just look like a stud, And anyways, so fast forward to the first week of the season, I ended up set.
Were you able to hunt that property where you saw that bachelor group?
Yep. That's why I was laying up there. It was a friend of the family, a real good friend of the family that had a farm, and she told me I could hunt out there. It was kind of almost like public land. A lot of people hunt, not so much early on, early in the season. I just ended up. I remember I had pheasant hunted out there that previous fall, and I remember there was some old nailed-in steps going into a tree, but there was no platform or nothing. It was probably 30 years old, and it was on a transition line. I just thought it looked like a good spot, but on the transition line of some cattails and some red brush, and I ended up getting in there, not knowing what the wind was doing or anything like that. It just looked like a good spot, so I got into there, and sure enough, that big buck ended up coming by me, and I think I double lunged him at about 12 yards. And
wow.
And it seemed easy, And I remember, my dad and I tracked him. He went probably 70 yards, and he had never shot a pull young buck. And here I think it scored like 137 gross and netted about 130. And he's like, I remember him pulling it up, and he's like, "Oh, you think you're going to get this mount? I think you should get this mounted." And I said, "I think I'd probably get a bigger one next year." And not knowing anything, just being a cocky kid,
I got pretty confident.
Yeah, I got humbled though, And then actually that following year, I shot like maybe a 120s 10-pointer with the gun, maybe a half a mile from there, and figured it out. But then I went about another 5-6 years before I shot another nice one and realized it wasn't so easy. But that's the experience, the learning curve keeps you pushing forward and trying to get better.
it had to have lit the fire under. I mean, just imagine a 15-year-old kid sees, a couple of big bucks coming out, comes together with the best plan you had at the time, and here you make it happen. I mean, what better way to get a kid just jacked on something and hooked for the rest of your life? I mean, that's an awesome story. It almost makes me feel like that saying ignorance is bliss. Like I remember being younger and you just found some good spot, picked a tree and see what happened. I almost missed that a little bit. Now I'm like thinking too deeply about everything, overthinking this and what are thermals that. And that was kind of the glory days of like, oh, you just find a good spot, sit down and wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
I kind of miss that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember just being almost disappointed that I was done fourth day into the season, and then now my buck tag was gone. Actually, that following night I was back out there sitting on in another tree overlooking where I had shot the deer 100 yards from there, and there was like a 2-year-old 8-pointer that went right through there again. I was just like, man, this is unreal, But yeah, anyways, it was must have just been a good year there because it was.
Wow. Did you end up hunting there again in the future?
I got humbled after that.
Did you end up hunting out of that same spot in the future?
Yeah, I did. Never had any luck like that. Actually, I'm still fortunate. I still can hunt that same farm, but that's the only buck it's the only buck I ever took out of there. So, but yeah, it's
so taking one that big. I mean, Wisconsin. That's a beautiful buck anywhere. 137-inch gross deer is a deer that I'm never passing ever. Taking that as a young archer, did that kind of like set the bar for you, or like were you still like were you going to look to shoot anything from there on out, or were you kind of now I'm a big buck hunter?
I wanted big bucks, and that's all I pretty much chased after that and to this to now. But that's almost like I was saying, it's a double-edged sword, because when I was being that young, I should have just I did what I wanted to do, and I'm happy with how it's turned out. I still love this game, but I would have been better off just getting good at killing some deer and shooting some does and figuring that out, rather than holding out for that one opportunity every year and then never getting good at killing. But I got good at getting an opportunity or two every year, but never got good at making good on that opportunity. So I had a lot of missed opportunities just from lack of knowing how to do it, precisely, essentially.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that is something that kind of plagues a lot of new bow hunters, both young and old, like later onset hunters, people who are in their 20s, 30s, even 40s, who start hunting, and everything you see on social media and the magazines is pass the young ones, wait for big ones. Well, geez, if you've not killed a deer, or you've only killed a handful of deer with your bow and arrow, that is the hardest damn animal to practice killing deer on. Is the oldest deer in the woods. You're going to fail a lot more than you're successful. And I think that what you said is you should have just got good at killing deer. It's a story I've heard time and time again, and one that I'm a little bit glad my dad kind of pushed me to shoot some does, because that helps build your confidence so much, and just the process of knowing when to draw, how long you can hold, how to pick a spot on an animal versus picking a spot on a target is way different. And I'm glad you touched on that, because that's one that I think if you're a young hunter is listening to this, or a new hunter, that's really what you should do, and do it responsibly, based on the area you're in. But if they're giving you a whole bunch of antlerless tags in the land you hunt, you see a lot of antlerless deer. My gosh, go out there and take advantage, because that's what's going to make you a better killer before you get to be the big buck hunter we all want to be.
Yeah, and it's like, and now I've gotten to the point where I'm trying to shoot does, but I don't do it until after the rut's all over, because for multiple reasons. But I'll tell you what, it's hard. Shooting a doe late season, I think shooting a doe late season is just as hard as shooting during, for me at least. I was trying, I've gotten it done, but like just this last year, we can hunt until the end of January here. And holy smokes, them deer, when it's 10 degrees out and you can't move without making a noise, them deer they've been hunted hard. They're just on pins and needles. And I'm not kidding. I had a hunt last winter where I probably saw ridiculous 20, 25, 30 does I had within range, and I couldn't even I couldn't get it done. I mean, I didn't even get a shot off. It's just when there's that many deer together too, they're just automatically on pins and needles and super spooky. And it's just, but I don't know. That's what makes you better at it, I guess. So, and when you don't have you don't have a buck tag and you can still hunt, then you just not like I'm going at it real super hard. It's just I'll go out when I can and just try to get it done. But
it's always good to exercise the skills. And late season, like you said, late season doe hunting I think it's a challenge no matter where you are. I'm assuming Wisconsin, because that's the only place I've hunted antlerless deer late season. But even on private ground, like people think, private, you got a big field. If you got a field, a food source they're coming to, well, shit, if you got a good food source, you're going to have even more eyeballs on you concentrated in your area, which makes everything so much harder. Even on the public, I've had a similar situation where you finally find a pocket of deer and then sure as shit, here comes 12 of them. And there's, a matriarch doe or two who have just, blown at 30,000 times at hunters over the last 3 months. And now you're going to try to get drawn in front of 12 deer and shoot one of these does. It's very challenging. And everything's super cold, so you can't make a move, you can't make a squeak. That rest on your bow, oh my gosh, it's that gives me more stress than anything. I think is just thinking about that. I'm just gonna throw in a quick story just for any listener who is like, well, yeah, just the point you made about getting better at killing deer. I got a good buddy. We go down to Illinois every year and hunt. He's one of the best bow hunters I know. Really good at killing deer now. But when he was a young man, he worked at an archery shop down here in southeastern Wisconsin, pretty well-known one. And he was like in high school and talking with one of the older guys who had been coming in the shop forever. And they were talking hunting. And my buddy told him, as a 17-year-old kid, I'm going to shoot a big buck this year. I'm going to, hold out and shoot a big one. And the guy said, well, how many big bucks have you shot before? And he said, well, none yet. The guy said, go out and shoot every damn deer you see. Get good at shooting deer. In about 5-10 years, then you can worry about big bucks. And my buddy really, really looked up to this guy. So he literally this was a long time ago, 20-some years ago, when there was a lot of antlerless tags for down in here. He would go out and get these, farm, I don't know what they call those, the farmer tags where they can, eliminate them off their property. And he was hunting on a farm close to his house. And I think he shot 13 deer that year, 13 does with his bow after this old guy told him. And he's like, the next season, he felt so confident that he could kill whatever was in 30 yards. And it changed like how he hunted because now he had this confidence. So I'm not saying go shoot 13 does in one season unless you want to and you have the capacity for that. But take advantage of what you can. Jeremy brought that point up. We've heard that before. That's a good one. Get good at getting drawn on deer. Hell, even practice drawing on deer. Get your finger off the trigger. Practice drawing on does that come by, as long as you're careful. I mean, even doing stuff like that can really help hone your skills and make you a little bit better at it. So when the time comes on a big one, you've got a little bit better idea of what you're doing. So I'm glad you dived into that. Good one. Where do you want to go from here? Do you have any other stories you want to jump into, or do you just want to talk a little bit about what you're doing right now, deer wise, or what do you got going on?
Well, I just thinking about shooting big bucks. You know,
So how does that look for you now? I'm assuming you've got some properties that you've hunted a number of times. You probably know them fairly well. What is this time of year like? What are you doing? You know, looking for that buck? Are you out driving? Are you scouting? Do you have cameras? Do you already have targets? You mentioned shed antlers when you and I were just getting started. I'm a shed freak. I love shed hunting. Like what is this time of year? What do you got going on as far as prepping?
I guess this is probably this month right now is probably the least prepping I guess I'm probably doing. Although I don't know, I guess worked on trails last weekend, just mowing some trails and spraying some trails and I just hung a couple of cameras. I only got a couple cameras out right now. I've learned, I used to run cameras year round until really this year because I got sick of, I get a lot of ants and bugs in them in like, June, July. So I'd kind of pulled them off in the spring after turkey season was over. And I figured I'd get hot and heavy with them in like late July when them bucks look about 25 inches bigger than they actually are. Because those are some pretty cool pictures. I'm not going to lie. But but I don't really have anything in particular. I got some, bucks that made it. A number of bucks that I was hunting last year that I had tabs on made it through the season. I think it's going to be a real interesting year. I got doing an out of state hunt. Looking forward to that.
Is that something you've done before? Have you done out of state hunt before?
Yeah, I try to do one every year for the most part. I guess I've hunted Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, Colorado for elk. That's not a vacation. That's just extreme work. It's Iowa. Yeah, I like Iowa. Pretty much all of them states they're awesome. Wisconsin's great too. I used to think that it couldn't be better than Wisconsin anywhere else until a buddy of mine talked me in, going and trying something. And really that's what keeps it fun, keeps you learning. Like when I was a younger hunter, I just would hunt the same farm, same few spots, and that gets really boring. Not hunt on public, but never had any when I was younger. Never had any real good encounters with big bucks on public. But I was doing hunting all the field edges and open woods under an acorn tree or something, but not really ever putting two and two together. But I'd get aggressive on the private land spots, and I'd just go right in after them, right into the bedding essentially, and I'd have some good encounters right off the bat until I scared everything out of there. And then as I got older, I realized, well, I could do that on public too. And that's where I started. When I started running cameras, that's better for me with just the bucks on any given property. I used to think there was a nice buck on every 40 acres, and it turned out when you started running cameras, I realized that me and all the neighbors are hunting all the same big buck, and then it was, well, if I want to get at some different big bucks, I better start tearing up the public. And I was lucky enough to have a good buddy of mine that would he had shot a really big buck on public. So I was like, well, I want to hunt with this guy. So then me and him would he'd follow me in the swamps. I'd follow him into the swamps, and just having someone with that same mindset just really put my learning on deer behavior and big buck behavior in the overdrive, essentially, because you got a good buddy to motivate you to go out there and try different things. It's a lot easier than doing it on your own. For me, at least, it was. Some people are really driven like that, but it gave me the confidence of going and basically getting lost and figuring it out. And then it just led to us hunting more aggressively and more aggressively and more aggressively. And that's what really opened our eyes, just thinking outside the box and learning, just doing stuff that no one else is doing. And boy, things really got interesting there, it's
you had
almost
mentioned yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh, it's like, everyone always is talking about, when's the best time to hunt the rut, or it's going to be a late rut this year. I love when people say it's going to be a late rut this year. I always say, it's like November 20th. It's not even worth hunting until November 20th or so.
I wouldn't even go in the woods till November 22nd.
But it's the same every year when them does start coming in the heat, whether it's 80 degrees or 50 degrees or 40 degrees or 30. It's the same, and it's just like, especially for hunting, like the way I hunt public would be a lot different than hunting private. Private, it's like I gotta wait for the perfect conditions, the right winds, and all that. And I really like making my tree setups where it's just, I know what they're going to do, but and there again, when it's like that, I'm hunting, I am really watching cameras on private, because I don't want to go in my spots, my setups, and educate the deer that are there as to what I'm doing until there's something there that I actually want to shoot. And
all right, I wanna pause you right there, because I want to dive in a little bit more to what you're talking about here. Because in the beginning, you kind of told me, you're doing kind of two different things here, right? You've got some private access in which you're using your cameras to tell you the right time to hunt, which we're going to talk about right now. That's what you're getting into. What I'd love to do, and then you got public spots in which you're now probably hunting a bit more aggressively. So like you got two different styles that you're employing depending on conditions or which place you want to hunt that day. What I'd love to hear from you is a little bit of specifics on, like, in your private spots where you have control or more control, probably not all control, but when you have more control over the, when you're getting in there, how much pressure you're putting on them, where you're putting these cameras, how are you what's your strategy in getting after the deer on private? Like, where are you putting your cameras? Are those field edge cameras? Are they back in the timber? Are you closer to the thick transition areas? And where are you hunting them? Like, waiting for that right time where you kind of know that they're going to be? Tell us a little bit about detail of what you're doing on the private side of things to get on that buck that you're after.
Yeah, I like I soak cameras on community scrapes. I look for community scrapes, and them, that'll tell you who's coming and going, and that's where I'll soak a camera on them and wait for something to enter the property. A lot of the properties I hunt, they're small acre properties. It's not so either the deer are there or they're not. And a lot of these lowland properties that I'm hunting, it's kind of swampy or marshy. It's like during the summer months, the big bucks aren't on them. They don't want anything to do with it. They're not going to go sit in a mosquito-ridden swamp if they don't have to. They're going to be up in on a hillside or in a fence row between some. It's like a giant food plot with the fields, But when the crops start coming off and that shift happens in early October, them deer, it's like right now 90% of the county is deer habitat, well, minus the vast fields, but everything in between them, they could be laying in. But when them fields come down and that foliage comes down, it really pushes them deer into them swamps, and it takes away 80% of the habitat that they're running around in right now. So, and there's a lot of deer around here, so it really squeezes them into the places that I can hunt at that point. And then that's when they start showing up. It's like I'll have a doe herd, the local doe herd all summer, but the bucks are bachelored up for the most part. And unless you got that bachelor group on that small acre, you're not going to see them all summer. But it's like from October to about the time they'll shed their antlers out, they'll be on the properties that I've got access to or am hunting. So
is that because those properties have some sort of security cover that those bucks want once the foliage comes down?
yeah,
And
they're thick and lowland, wetlands essentially, for the
so
most
the
part. They're
scrapes,
timber.
yeah, so that thick cover, that's the kind of stuff we love. That's where they like to hang out. That's where you got to have that if you want a buck to get some age on them. They got to have a place that they can hide from people.
Mhm.
The community scrapes that you're talking about that you run your cameras on, I'm assuming those are somewhere transitioning up to hardwoods where their ground is a little bit harder, firmer, where they can have a scrape, because a lot of I don't know the exact marshland you're hunting, but a lot of stuff that I'm on, they're not scraping in the lowland stuff. So you must be on some sort of transition edge. Are you looking where they're coming out or traveling through?
Yep.
And that's where you've got your camera on. Is that also where you're hunting, or are you hunting in a different area?
No, I don't. Well, I will and I won't. I won't put a camera on typically on something that I'm right where I'm hunting. I might have that camera on the trail close to where I'm hunting. So if anything, if that camera spooks that mature buck from going through that spot, he might push them through the trail that I want them on. But I like inside corners for my stands or just transition edges. Just right where I think they're going to be moving through historically, and then I guess and every time I'll set up a stand, I'm really big on putting a licking branch and scraping up the ground, and not so much to thinking like that's going to pull the deer to that spot. But if a buck's coming through and he sees the ground's ripped up or there's a licking branch in any deer, it's a signpost. It's like a fire hydrant or a dog. They're just naturally going to start sniffing it and do their thing. And I just want to get them to stop so I can get a shot at them. That's why I want that there, because they might stop there for just 2 seconds, but that's what I want them to do. And I'm hunting. I've been hunting with traditional the last few years, so I need them close.
Really?
Like, I want them close. I don't, from my younger years where I would just get in a spot and blaze a trail 30 yards this way and 30 yards this way and step into the Thunderdome. Now it's like I want that shot. I want a 12-yard shot, 10 to 15-yard shot. So I'm using everything I can to my advantage, because I just want that soup shot, and that's really just spending that time on that setup and just dragging some brush around to pinch them right through where I want to go, but not making it too obvious that they don't like feeling like they're getting pinched down. They're going to take the path of least resistance, but you got to do it subtly, it seems like, so.
Subtle is the exact word I had in my head as you were describing that. And that's that's kind of the culmination of all those experiences that you have as a hunter coming up, like we talked about before with the story of your first one, getting good at killing deer. Those little things of like getting a deer to stop, or like stopping them where you want them, like those things all add like 5% to your success rate. And in bow hunting, which is a really hard thing to come together, especially with trad gear, good for you for doing that, by the way. That's a tough game. You need every little percentage you can get. So if you can improve your odds by bending over a couple branches here to get them to loop on the trail a little bit closer, every little bit matters. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize, that these successful hunters, there's no one magic trick to being successful. It's all these little things that are going to put the odds a little bit more in your favor, just a little bit more in your favor. Hell, the thing you were talking about with the licking branch, just to get those bucks to stop for just a second or two. I've been doing that with my trail cameras for a long, long time, because I'm a cheapie and I'd rather buy 10 real cheap trail cameras than one real good one. So I buy these cheap ones, and sometimes they got a 2-second trigger speed. So like if I'm on a trail and a group of bucks walk by, that camera is getting shitty, blurry pictures. I can't tell what they are. But if I hang a licking branch and I kick the dirt open in front of my camera, that buck's going to stop every time, and I'm going to have a way better photo of them. So I use that with almost I hung 4 cameras the other day, and I made a mock scrape, a licking branch, and I kicked the dirt just to get them to stop in front of every single one of them. So like that technique right there, like those little things you can do that are going to make it just a little bit better, all those eventually start adding up. and putting odds in your favor.
Mm-hmm. That's what it takes. It's you just need one thing to work for you. And if you can do 100 things and one of them works for you, then that's all, you only got to win once. And you can lose all season long, but you just got to win once. So
now, if you had more that you wanted to talk about with the scenario you just described, the private spot, feel free to finish out that idea. Otherwise, if you wrapped it up, I would just want to hear a little bit about, or eventually once you're done, how your strategy on public land is either similar or different, what you're doing with cameras or what you're doing with setups that are similar or different versus what you're doing on your private access spots.
Yeah, I guess like public. Well, it depends. If I'm hunting out of a tree stand, it's pretty similar on public. But a lot of times when I'd hunt public, I do a lot of hanging hunts, and half the time I just take my tree stand for a long walk. So which is nice, but was like public, and that's a really opened my eyes to just be not waiting for it. Just going in and going after it. I can go into public and just walk the whole thing, find a hot sign, tear it up. And I want to be the first person to ruin it. I mean, not to be a jerk, but I don't want to wait till someone else has hunted it a bunch of times and blown out a deer out of there. Then I don't want to hunt it. I want to get in on the public and get it in there early and hunt it. And like I said, maybe it makes me sound like a jerk, but I want to be the first one to ruin it.
I love that quote. I love that. I think that's why I hunt opening weekend, no matter how hot it is and how much I'm saying, God, the mosquitoes are going to be bad. I think that's why I do it, is because I've always got a little itch of like, I know where a couple good deer are, and I don't want to be playing second fiddle. I don't want to, have somebody else go and blow it up, because everyone knows everything nowadays with cell cameras and how crowded they are. It's like, if anyone's going to ruin it, I'd love it to be me, because I could have that 3% chance that it actually works.
Get the first opportunity on it, and
I love
but
that.
Then that's how you learn so much more than just going and sitting in the same spot. I mean, I'll do a lot of hanging, even on my private spots. If I hunt in a spot and I don't like it, I'll get down and move 10 yards, 20 yards, or whatever it takes. A lot of times I'll go into a spot and I'll pick the tree and I'll go in there and set up, and 20 minutes later it's like, I don't like it, and I tear down, and I'll be sitting there, I'll be like, that tree 20 yards over there, that's got to blow down just beyond it. It's going to funnel them deer through there. I see that's how they're going to cut through there. It looks like a little more comfortable, and I'll tear down and go set up on that. And that actually is how I shot my deer with the bow this last fall. But I shot a really nice one in just doing it.
Yeah.
And that was the same.
Would you mind diving into that a little bit? Maybe like, why you set up where you did, and then like, just walk us through that one a little bit.
Sure. That was on a lease I've got in hill country, and I never shot a Pope Young on that farm with the bow. With the gun, I've done pretty good, but with the bow, that was just so it's like there's the ridge top, and then coming down from the top of the ridge, maybe halfway down that ridge, there was like a flat, and it was probably just maybe 1/8 of an acre thicket on that flat. And from scouting it, it's like there's always a bunch of beds on there, so I knew there'd be doe bedding on it. So I had went in there. I think prior, I shot him November 15th. So I went in there and set up November 14th, and I wanted to set up downwind of that. The thicket. I thought if they're cruising, they're going to be cruising right through there. And I get in there, and there was a big blowdown, kind of blowing halfway up the steep hill. So going up to the top of the ridge. So I was like, okay, I set up 20 yards downwind of that blowdown, and I was pretty much on the edge of where that flat would dumped off and went into a bottom, and the bottom was just tall grass. And so I was right on the edge of that, and I thought, okay, if anything coming through here to scent check this bedding, and I'm going to blow it out coming into it, but I'm going to just come in here. I was going to do an all day hunt. And so I'd set up on that, and I was in a tree, and I got in there. It was I was gonna sit there afternoon. Basically, I got there around noon or 11 o'clock, and set up in a tree. Maybe sat there for 30 minutes. I didn't like it, and I seen another tree, maybe 25 yards away, and I thought that looks like the spot I need to be in. Well, I get to that tree, and it was just too big for my straps to go around, and I could double them up,
I
but
hate
then
that.
I only had the three. I had the three lone wolf sticks, and I hunt with an assault hang on. And I'm like, darn it! I'm like, I hate it when you get into a spot and you think you gotta go a little further, and then you realize you went too far, and then and then I lose my confidence, and then I can't sit long if I don't have that confidence. So, anyways, I was standing next to that tree, and I see another tree, but it was only probably maybe 18 inches in diameter. It was a smaller white oak, but it had all its leaves on it still, like a lot of them young white oaks do. And I thought, I can get in that maybe 12 feet off the ground, which is about where I like to hunt. I don't like to be too high. I like that 12 feet. I'm really comfortable right there. And so I got up in that tree, and I had a snips with me. I snipped some of the branches with my snips, and I had a little tie wire in my pack. So I used the tie wire to tie the branches with leaves on it right behind me off another branch to give me a little more cover, which I thought it looked it. I'm like, okay, I feel really good about this. And I sat there.
Now, sorry, Jeremy, is that, so you kind of mentioned that thicket kind of tails off and comes downhill to a little grassy area. When you're setting up on that, by that blowdown there, are you kind of on the uphill side? Like
down on the downhill side. So it'd be like the
downhill
top of the ridge. It came down steep. Then there was a little, maybe like a 40-yard area flat. And then it dumped off steep to a bottom, grassy bottom. And I was just right up on that first edge, up above that grassy bottom, overlooking that flat where I knew there'd be doe bedding. But I knew that, me setting up, I'd bump anything out of there, but I didn't really care if I bumped the doe out of there. I was hunting for cruising bucks, and just
that makes sense.
Going for it, so I set up there, and then actually when I set up in that white oak, all of a sudden I noticed, I'm like, oh shoot, there's a scrape like 12 or 15 yards away from me. I'm like, this is perfect. And not a big scrape, but there was a scrape. I could see a scrape there. And I'm like, okay, that's perfect. And the wind's blowing right in my face, essentially off into the bottom. So I thought it was an awesome setup. And I sat there that whole afternoon, and I think I seen like a 1.5-year-old buck, maybe 150 yards away through the timber. That was the only deer I saw. And I'm like, man, I thought it'd be good, but and I'm like, you know what? The next day I was gonna do an all-day hunt. So I'm like, you know what? How about I just leave my setup in here? I'm gonna come in here in the morning. I'll sit it, and if nothing's going on, I'll get hunt half the day. I'll tear it down, and I'll just take a walk and go reset up on something else. But going to stay in the woods all day. So next day comes, and actually I had a camera in my pack, and that I had pulled walking in off a spot I was thinking about hunting, but I didn't see any. I let that soak for a week, and I didn't see anything on there that I was interested in. So that's why I ended up back where I was. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna throw this camera on the scrape when I got down that night, and I'm like, just if there's a deer using this. I'm coming back in the morning anyways, and we'll see if that gives me some confidence. So anyways, in the morning I checked that camera, and it was like maybe that 6 point or something I'd seen that day before. Had visited that scrape, a couple hours before I got there. There's only deer that had gone through there. So I'm like, okay, maybe there's just not a lot of deer, using this area right now. So, but anyways, I sat there, and it was a 65-degree day, and I was thinking, all right, didn't see anything all morning, except maybe I did. I had a doe blowing at me as usual at one point. And anyways, and so that was the only deer I'd seen that morning, and it was 65 degrees, and I thought, boy, the wind was supposed to shift. So I'm like, I should get out of here, and I'll go and take a hike. And where I was thinking about setting up would have been a half a mile walk, and I'm like, man, I'm going to be just soaked in sweat, but I'm really comfortable right now. So I just kept kicking the can down the road when I was going to make that move. And then it was 10:30. All of a sudden, boom, I heard something. I look, and here comes a buck right through that bedding, working the edge of the where it dropped off, right, the edge that I was sitting on. Comes up to the scrape, and I'm like, here we go. And I was standing, I was ready to rock and roll, and he works the scrape, but the whole time he worked it, he's just facing directly at me. He never gave me anything but a frontal shot.
And you have your trad bow?
Yep. I got a Java Man Elkhart I was hunting with. It's a longbow.
Cool.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And it was really nice. 150 class 10-pointer. And all of a sudden here he's coming. And there was a real faint trail that went right under the tree I'm in, which must have been the trail that the bucks were using, because the main trail that I was overlooking that I thought they had all pinched through, no, he wasn't on that one. He was following right on the edge of the drop off, and he was going to come right underneath my tree. And I'd walked across that trail to get to the tree, and then I walked across that trail to screw with the camera. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like he got about 6 yards, and I'm like, I started making a clicking noise with my mouth. I thought about trying to bleed at him with my mouth, but I thought if I tried making a deer noise, he's just going to look right up at me and bust me and facing me. I wasn't going to take that shot. So I just clicked with my mouth, kind of goofy, and he stops, and he swings his head and shoulders to the left, and he swings his head and his shoulders to the right. When he swung to the right, he opened himself up just enough. I was able to slip one right in there, and I hard shot him. He went 40 yards and tipped over. I don't even think he even knew it hit him. It was
that's awesome.
It was awesome.
That's awesome.
I sat in the tree for another hour and just relished the moment. I'm like, is this real life? Like, you do all that work, and then when it happens, it's just it seems so easy, but there's so much that went into it, but to actually have it all work out like that, it's just a real thing.
And it's just interesting thinking about, so you went down, you hung the stand there, you made the move, you noticed the scrape, and not that the scrape was like maybe something that was, bucks were keying in on, but it's showing you that bucks are cruising through, they're checking the doe bedding areas. And then you think of like a big buck like that, how many little spots that he has in his little notebook of like, oh, there's some girls over here, this is a doe bedding, this. And then if you just put your time in, no matter how many times you maybe hunted or spooked those does, those big bucks who have been around the property for multiple years, they know where they need to hit. And finding those routes, which aren't always big trails, like you kind of alluded to, he was on this little faint trail. They have their paths that they know. I go here, I use the wind or the thermals to my advantage. Man, to think of all those little spots and just know which one or how to position on it, and then just wait and just be there at the right time, right time, right place. But knowing those spots, man, that's a really cool story. And that was what did you say, 150-inch 10-pointer?
Yeah, I think 151 and 7/8, and he dressed at 206, and
wow,
it was awesome. It was awesome.
Hell of a
watch him tip over, and I'll say this: it's like when I hunted compound, and I loved hunting compound, or nothing. I still have my compound. I just don't shoot it anymore because it's like the whole trad thing is just made shooting. It's like I sucked again, and I had to relearn everything. And that's the fun part about hunting. It's everything that goes into it. It's like, yeah, killing a big buck. I mean, it's awesome. It's the money shot, but the rest of it is all. That's what I think about 365 days a year. So. If it wasn't for the rest of it, I don't know. That's what makes it so much fun. But I was saying, like with shooting the trad bow, it's like honestly at that 20 yards and less, I don't feel it's a disadvantage whatsoever than when I shot compound. I feel like I had a higher percentage of deer I screwed up on at 20 and under than I do with the trad bows that I have. I think it just simplifies it. And if you can practice it enough that you're a decent enough shot, and it really makes you focus on the stand setups and getting them deer where you want them and coming through kind of how you want them, within a certain extent. But at 15 yards, you get a big buck broadside 15 yards and you're 12 feet off the ground. That's a pretty big kill zone, and you don't need to be shooting lasers to smoke them. And I think they're a lot quieter too. Maybe I'm completely wrong about that, but it seems like these deer that you shoot with the trad, they don't seem to jump as much. I don't know. It's not a scientific study, but it's just maybe it's just a confidence thing or something. I don't know, but I just feel I feel really good about when you get them in close range like that. There's just so many less things I feel like they can go wrong than when I'd be shooting with a compound and my arrow would fall off the rest, or I'd look through a peep sight and it'd be close and I could see his brown. Here I just draw them back and looking at the smallest spot I can look at on them and let it fly. And so far I've had some pretty good.
That's a badass story, and congratulations. Yeah. Congratulations on that awesome buck. I would agree with you 100%. I haven't hunted with a trad bow, and I took a trad bow bear hunting and it didn't go well. It went well for the bear, but I choked a couple of times. But man, I'll tell you this, that you're absolutely spot on, that 15 yards and in, having that open sight picture on a trad bow is so much better than trying to line up a peep sight and a pin when they're coming close. It gets really tough. Like, it gets really tricky, and it overcomplicates, exactly like you said. It really does. So I see the allure to it, and I think it's really badass that's how you're taking your bucks nowadays, man. That's really cool.
It's just I like learning, relearning something, and just always, I don't know, the challenge of it. And but it's just shooting's fun, because I sucked again. It's like I was a pretty good shot with the compound, and I could shoot really good at 30-40 yards, but I know some guys are really prolific at killing big bucks at 30-40 yards with compounds, but I never was. Every time I shot at a deer at over 30 yards, it never ended well. And it's like, now I'm not even interested in taking that shot. So hopefully I don't get tempted into doing something like that, but it's maybe down the road, as I get better, I can. But right now it's like that 20, low 20s, 25 would be my limit, and I wouldn't even think about anything further than that. But that's why I want them close, and that's how I set up in threes. But on the ground, that's different too, and it's just, yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit about that, or transition to that. You mentioned that you do a little bit of hunting from the ground also. So kind of talking or shifting gears a little bit into that public piece. As far as what you're doing on the public that's maybe different or similar to what you're doing on your private land setups, are you looking for the same things? Are you playing it more aggressively on the public now, or are you kind of going with the same philosophy as what you're doing on the private, waiting for the right time, let the cameras tell you when and where you need to be? Or what's kind of your outlook if, going in on public?
Well, on public, if I'm hunting out of a tree stand, I want to go in and I want to find the hot sign. I want to know where the party's going on, or, I'll go walk the whole property off. And even if you scare the deer, well, whoop-de-doo is if you're bumping them and they see you coming and wherever they were bedded and it worked for them and they got away and you didn't chase them or shoot at them, or they're going to go do the same thing again because it worked, unless you do it too many times. Obviously you run them out of an area, but if you go through an area the first day of a hunt and say, okay, well, this area, this is where all the hot sign is, rather than where I'd go in and set up in a spot where I wanted the hot sign to be, and you waste a day or two until you realize that that's not where they are. Just go walk the whole thing and find out where they are, and then actually that's where you want to spend your time. lot of times, yeah, you end up hunting where you want them to be, but it's not the case. You got on the ground, then you can get even more aggressive and just go find a party essentially, and get yourself in the middle of it and use a lot of different tactics on doing that. And things can get really interesting in a hurry, without saying too much on that front. That's a whole nother can of worms, but yeah.
When you
covering ground.
Yeah,
I was saying, covering ground, thinking outside the box, and the hot sign, and just that's how you're going to learn what the deer are doing at that time.
So let's say, like, what's your favorite time? Like, what do you consider to be your kind of maybe your bread and butter, or like your time of year? Where is it that late October time period that, with the stand on your back, you're going into a piece of property that you like or you think looks good or holds deer, and you're going to be looking for a hot sign? Are you looking for, rutting? Are you looking for does? Are you looking for that buck sign, like pre-rut sign? What's kind of your, where do you like to be on that?
I guess depending on the time of the year. I mean, early season, I'm going to focus on food. Them coming to and from food or trying to hunt a bed. If you think you got a beat on where they're bedding, and I used to do a lot of shining when I was younger, and I don't really anymore. It's just a lack of time and because I do so many things. But yeah, you used to try to spot, shine them and see where they're coming out in the evening, and then okay, if he's in this field and it's 45 minutes after dark, you could probably get a good idea where he might be bedding and try to go intercept him on that. But then after that, it's like you get to mid-October and things really start heating up in the woods, and they really start laying down some sign, and you can go take a walk and figure out who's coming from where, and read the sign essentially, and then set up like that, or go do a hang and hunt. And then at late October, before them does are coming in the heat, them bucks are just foaming at the mouth for some activity. They'll hear you. Sometimes they'll hear you, and they'll come and check you out on their own accord if you're not sounding like a person, and you're just slipping around in there. Next thing you know, you got a 1.5-year-old walking up to you because he thinks you're a deer, or whatnot, and then just with like calling and or rattling, or just get the earth moving around, and as they would say, and yeah. Or just covering ground and being out there, and you might all of a sudden, and leading into November, next thing you know, when they're chasing, you might just find yourself in the middle of 5 bucks chasing a doe for her life, and being in the middle of that, and when you're on the ground covering ground, you're not. It's like, yeah, you're not getting cold. You don't have to carry the tree stand around. You're always moving. You're just scaring deer, which scare a lot of deer, but
you're also not tied down to anything. And you mentioned already that you're not afraid to get down and move, or that doesn't bother you. And I'm very similar in that idea that if there's something that looks better, I'm moving. Like, I don't care what time of day it is. I will take down a set, move over and climb. But a lot of guys don't want to do that, right? So like, as soon as you bring that stand in and you kind of mirror yourself to a tree, if you're not willing to get down and move and adjust, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage. Whereas even if you got to stand on your back, like you mentioned, and you're just slinking through the woods looking for that hot sign, well, shit, you can set up on the ground and sit there for an hour without hanging a tree stand. And if nothing happens, then you keep on moving. So I think that adjustability, that flexibility that you kind of are getting at here in that time frame is so huge. And I do want to ask you one specific question about that. So let's say we're like, the late October, one of my favorite times to hunt. Late October, it's a little bit of pre-rut. Bucks are definitely starting to get itchy, especially those bigger ones. If you're going into a piece of public, what kind of areas are you kind of in the back of your mind as your destination, right? So you're walking, you're scouting your way through. Are you like on the edge of thick? Are you on the edge of bedding? Are you going into like, thick, nasty, marshy stuff? Or are you kind of where you think bucks are going to be traveling? What's kind of your mindset as you work your way through the woods, the marsh? What are you looking for?
Transition edges, follow the edges, the transition edges. That's what I want to walk rather than just plowing through the abyss. And we've done plenty of that, but I just want to walk the transition edges. That's where you're going to find out where they're coming in and out of what, and you're going to be able to read the sign really well. Transition edges to big points. Like I've heard it a million times, but big bucks love points, and there's never been truer words spoken. They relate to points, and you look at an aerial photo of something, it's like, okay, well, where's the transition lines that are leading into what big points out here? That's what I want to go walk or spend my time scouting. But essentially I'll just walk the transition lines throughout the properties, and I'll tell you when they're laying down hot sign. If there's not hot sign throughout there, then they're not saying they're not there, but that's not going to capture my attention long enough for me to feel like I want to spend time there to feel confident that I'm in the game, because I want to be in the game to be success. You got to be in the game to be successful. And if you're not in the game, then keep looking, keep covering ground, keep going. That's how you learn stuff by, I've done that where you just go and sit in a tree for 3-4 hours and nothing happens. And it's like, or I could have went and scouted the whole property in 3-4 hours and figured out a lot more intel in that time, especially in the marshes and in the lowland areas where you can't see much. So just because I heard a deer 50 yards away and didn't see it that evening, what did that really tell me? Not a whole lot. But,
yeah. Now,
you only get one November 1st every year. You only get one November 2nd every year. I don't want to spend those primo days, hearing a deer off in the distance that I'm not even confident of the spot, especially on like a public spot. On the private is completely different, because if I'm hunting the private, it's because I'm confident that there's a buck in the neighborhood that I want to shoot, and not just wish or hoping that something materializes that I don't even know exists. I mean, it can happen, and it does happen, but I want to put as many odds in my favor as I can, because it's so hard to do it for one, that I don't want it to all be just luck. I want it to be 10% skill and 90% luck, not 99% luck and 1% skill.
Okay. So I like that point, and I'm not going to hold you here too much longer, because we've been on for an hour and 10 minutes, but I do want to ask you. Okay, good, because I love where this is going. So for the listeners here, one thing that I think is really important to point out, and maybe you've already come to this conclusion, but a guy like Jeremy, right, who's going through all of his strategies, when he has 2 weeks of vacation throughout the year, and he just mentioned there's only one November 1st. When a guy doesn't have a month to take off, some of these guys that we're watching on YouTube or watching hunting videos, this is what they do. They have all the time in the world. So when he's saying what he's looking for, and he only has X amount, a small time frame, that becomes so much more important, because that's where he's focusing his effort in his limited time frame. That must be important. So take note of what he's talking about. He just mentioned that he's using cameras on private to tell him when that buck that he wants to shoot is there, what he's doing, so that he can make the most of it. So my question for you is translating that over to the public side. When you're on your walk, say you're walking some sort of marshy transition between dogwood or cattail or some sort of marsh grass, what kind of sign are you looking for? You don't have the trail cam pictures. Maybe this is an area you don't have any pictures, so you don't know the quality of buck. What kind of sign is like that big buck trail cam picture on private? Does that make sense? You get that big 10. Oh, the 10 is here. So you're walking a transition on public. What does it take for you to pull over and be like, well, shit, there's a big track or this size of rub, or what are you seeing that tells you, yeah, maybe that rub, maybe I'm going to keep, but I mean, you're going to find rubs on that transition. So you find a rub that's, halfway decent, is that going to cause you to pull over and hunt there? Or what does it take kind of in your mind? What are you thinking of when you see something that's like, this is a spot I need to be in now? Does that make sense?
Yeah. When that big buck's looking at me from 15 yards away.
That'll do it.
Big track. That was maybe 5-6 years ago. I was walking with a buddy, and all of a sudden it was like I wanted to get to one spot, and we're walking a transition line, and all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, look at this! There's a big 4-finger track right here, and it's fresh. I'm like, let's just hold up right here and just start moving slowly. And I think we probably got maybe 10 yards, and all of a sudden something's coming right towards us, and maybe a 140s, maybe a 150 pops out, and my buddy was on full draw on it, and he just needed to take a step, and he had already locked on us, looking at us, and it was game over. But it was just like, see, I told you so. Like man, when it all seems like to come together, it all seems so easy. But you'll cover so many miles, and you put in so much work, and then when you get an opportunity, it's like that really wasn't that hard. But it's just not. It's just, yeah, I don't know.
How do you go about? So, like, let's say, do you do a lot of scouting in the off season?
Yeah. I like to take walks and shed hunt and scout and cover ground, and but shed hunting it's a lot different. And when I'm shed hunting, sometimes I feel like I'm losing out on valuable time that I could be scouting, because I feel like that's one of the best times of the year to be scouting is when that snow melts, early spring, rather than like when I'm shed hunting. If I'm actually shed hunting, then I'm focusing on food. And it's just that whatever food, the hot food source that there was at the time that the bucks were shedding. And that can be completely different than what they were doing in October, November, when I could be hunting and killing them. So a lot, that's a whole different game in and of itself. It's just focusing on
a little bit of a double-edged sword.
Yep. It is, because that's like the best time other than in season scouting to be scouting is that really early spring before that green up. But if I'm focusing on whatever pick bean fields or stand corn or whatever crops that the deer were pounding in February when there was a cold blast and causing them to drop a bunch of antlers. That's not what they were doing in October or November, to a completely different animal. But I guess that I can tell you what kind of animals are in the area too, but it's not great. It's not really good scouting per se.
The reason for that question is I'm just kind of curious here. This is a little bit of a selfish question. I'm just really curious. So for a guy who spends a lot of time in the off season doing a little shed hunting, little walking, little scouting, are you, let's say just on public here. Okay. Let's just say on public, when you're walking out and scouting some properties, are you picking, like, do you ever find a spot that you think is dynamite, and like, do you pre-pick a tree that you want to hunt out of that fall? Like, get an idea of like, oh man, if I'm here the first or second week of October, that tree right there is going to be dynamite. Or
Absolutely.
like it.
Yep, absolutely. I love doing that. And I in my head, and I really just these last couple of years started really using Onyx for pinning. I'll pin the tree, I'll label what kind of tree it is and what kind of wind I want to hunt it on, rather than just looking at it and saying, okay, I like this spot, because so many times, it seems so clear to me at the time I'm there, but then I go in to hunt it and everything looks completely different. And especially if you're going in the dark, and then you're going too far, or you end up 40 yards away and you scent up the area, and then you lose confidence in the spot. And if you lose confidence in the spot, you might as well just go do something else, because you're not going to be in the game. That confidence is so important. But it's so nice to have have these spots to where I can just pull up a map and say, oh, where do I want to hunt today? Well, I really like this spot. Okay, I need it. What kind of winds? It's going to be a southwest wind. What tree do I have around here that a southwest wind will work on? Okay, yep, boom, that's that spot. Okay, now I know I can go there, and I know I already thought it looked great, so I have confidence in it, and I can go there and throw a hunt at it and see what happens. But
all right, I got a couple of different things I want to ask you about that. One thing, this is not a plug for anybody, but in Onyx, I don't use the folders on Onyx the way I should, but I know that you can create folders and say you had like a west wind folder. So you could put all your pins that were good for west winds in a specific folder. So if you're like, oh, tomorrow's the southwest, let me click on that folder and all your pins, which I think would be like, because I'm doing the same thing you are. I'm taking a picture of the tree, saving it with my pin. So if I go there in the dark, I can be like, okay, yep, this is the right one. Because a lot of times it's hard to tell. But okay. Off that, the whole reason of the scouting and the do you pre-pick trees, here's the reason for the question. How often do you find yourself actually killing out of the trees that you have pre-planned versus a hang and hunt that day that you just found hot sign? What do you think? Are you killing more out of pre-planned trees or out of like, I just frickin' found this, hung in the stand first time I've ever put in that tree?
Probably the first time you hunt out of the tree. But I will say, like that buck I shot last fall, that was a spot where I had picked a tree and put a pin on it for the wind I wanted to hunt it. And then I had that wind and I thought, I'm going to go try the spot. And then I got in a tree and didn't like it. So I got down and set up in the next, that got me into that spot. And then once I was up there, I was like, okay, the grass is greener 20 yards that way. And then it was, I can't even get in here unless I double up my straps, in which case I can get about 8 feet off the ground and have no cover. So, but that's it. It got me where I needed to be. And then a couple of hop skips and jump later, I was successful.
I was just curious because, man, I've got so many pins of potential trees I want to hunt that I, put in every spring. But when I look around at the deer that I've shot, especially the larger deer, almost all of them are first time into the spot, picked a random tree. Well, not random, but at the time, very few are like, whoa, man, when I had a perfect plan drawn up and that's going to be the tree, like, which I do I'm like, oh, that's the tree. And then like, I never kill out of those trees. It's always like a random freaking walk through the woods and this spot looks good. And you set up and that's where I always seem to find the most success, to be perfectly honest.
I'd agree. I agree with that, especially in like a public setting, whereas on like private where you can control a lot more. You can spend a lot more time, cutting trails to lead them to where you want them and doing this, that, and the other thing. Whereas public, you can't. You just gotta go and follow your gut instinct. And when you're like giddy about the spot, that's where you need to be. And you'll know it when you see it, and you're like, oh my gosh, this just looks amazing. I need to stop right here and just this is where I need to be. Then you're, that gives you the confidence that you need to stay put until you can possibly be successful.
And I think that's a great little closing note here is when you see that sign, like Jeremy just said, and you just know it, like that's the place to be. And if you're walking around with a stand on your back, don't feel like you have to set up in a mediocre spot. Jeremy said it before that sometimes he takes his tree stands for a long walk. And I think that's a thing I've heard from a number of guys, that if you are feeling pressure to get your stand up in a spot because it's, daylight, the end of daylight's coming, sunset's coming, don't feel like you just have to kill 2 hours. There's a lot to be learned in those 2 hours if you use it to scout. And just dive in, see where you're going to bump some deer from, rather than throwing your stand up in a tree just to hunt, because you feel like that's what you have to do. I think that idea of taking the tree stand for a walk and using it as, hey, today's an educational mission. I'm just going to learn whatever the hell I can about this spot. I'll bump deer if I have to, and I can always come back. I think that is the plan. And if you find that thing that says, nope, you'll know right away, hey, here, hunt here, do that. Then go ahead, set up your stand, but don't be afraid to just keep walking.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Dang. Okay. Well, hey, I'm not going to hold you anymore. We're an hour and 20 minutes in, Jeremy. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat with me. I think I'd potentially love to have you on again at some point, maybe later in this season or whatever, and chat with you. It's been a lot of fun. You and I hunt a lot of similar terrains, so it's just cool picking your brain and hearing your outlook on it. So I just want to thank you for sitting down and recording this with me.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I'm planning on knocking down a couple big ones with the bow this year too, so we can talk about that after I'm done.
Yeah, we haven't talked about out of state stuff, which I would love to pick your brain on. What you're looking for in an out of state hunt and all that. So let's just plan on you knocking down a few this year. We'll go through those stories maybe in January, and we'll have that figured out.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
All right, cool, man. Well, hey, thanks a lot. Thanks to everybody who listened. Hopefully you enjoyed that as much as I did. Yeah, we'll be back again next week. Jeremy, thanks so much, and best of luck this season with your in-state and out-of-state adventures, man. I hope that trad bow gets busy this fall.
Mm-hmm. Gee, it's gonna. Thanks, Eric.
All right, buddy.
And good luck.
Well, you have
good luck to you too.
I appreciate that. All right, guys, have a good night. We will talk to you next time.
Yep.